G'day guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we are here to take a look at some more trade rumours. And if you want to keep up to date with more trade rumours and every single team's target player for the trade period this season, then make sure to subscribe to the channel right now, as in 2 weeks time we will be covering every single team's trade targets. So make sure to keep an eye out on that, guys. But today we're going to be covering a couple of rumours that have happened, that have been brought up over the last couple of weeks, and we start with the Hawks. And at this stage it does seem that they are gunning for an A-grade player in this trade period or off-season period. According to Matthew Lloyd, he did say on Footy Classified that he'll be shocked if they don't bring in an A-grade midfielder over the off-season, and they're big game hunting players in terms of midfielders. They're looking at Harley Reid, Zach Butters, and there's even been some whispers regarding Christian Petrarca, as it does seem that he's been playing a lot more forward for Melbourne in the last 4 or 5 weeks, and he wants to play predominantly midfield. So there's been some talk regarding him. Of course, we know the big stories regarding Petrarca last year, wanting to leave Melbourne for a big Victorian club like Collingwood, Carlton, and Hawthorn as well. Well, it seems that it may come once again. But sticking with Harley Reid as well, it does seem that there's a lot of money that has been thrown around regarding the #1 draft pick from a few years ago. So according to Tim Watson, he did say that they've made a godfather offer to bring Harley Reid to the club for $25 million over 12 years. And he said he's not making this up. This is what he heard yesterday. But of course, if you have been watching the news as of late, Ross Lyon has went on a rampage throughout the media and said that he's never talked to Harley Reid. Now that doesn't say that St Kilda haven't talked to him or haven't given that offer to him, but I kind of lean towards believing Ross Lyon. We get a couple of more St Kilda trade rumours throughout this video, which we will discuss, but I did like how Ross Lyon came out and pretty much extinguished all of those rumours pretty quickly. And I think more clubs are going to start to do this in the future. But yeah, Harley Reid's been offered a lot of money from different clubs, Hawthorn as well. But sticking with the players, Harley Reid, Zach Butters, and Christian Petrarca, those players in particular, going to Hawthorn or whatever, I think that Butters will most likely stay throughout his contract with Port Adelaide, then potentially look to move on. Petrarca, bit of an interesting one. I don't see him leaving Melbourne now. I think his contract's too big to get rid of, but we'll have to wait and see. And Harley Reid, this has been a very interesting one for the West Coast Eagles. It seems that they've been offering him a lot of money to stay. In recent reports, we've heard the fact that he has been leaning towards staying with the West Coast, but obviously Hawthorn have had a lot of links with him in the past. I think he'll stay out at least a short-term deal with the West Coast at this moment, and I think Hawthorn will have to look maybe elsewhere. If I had to pick one of them that is most likely to leave their club to go to Hawthorn, I'd be leaning towards Harley Reid, then Zach Butters, and then Christian Petrarca. But that's kind of my thoughts, so let me know down below what you think Hawthorn are going to be hunting for the most going into next year. But one player that could be on the outer at Hawthorn is a midfielder, James Worpel. We've talked about him quite a lot, has been linked to Melbourne and St Kilda in the past, but now Geelong seem to be the front runners. At this stage, Geelong have offered James Worpel a 4-year deal, which is considered to be an attractive pitch. However, in more recent times, we have seen Hawthorn actually make it clear that they want to keep James Worpel, despite having some injury troubles in seasons gone by. We have heard information regarding James Worpel that if the Hawks are able to bring in an A-grader, that Worpel may be the one to be pushed out, and they haven't been exactly keen to 100% sign him. But I think with injuries to players like Will Day in the past, I think they would like to keep James Worpel for at least a long-term deal. It seems like Hawthorn's offer is pretty similar, so I'll have to wait and see, but at this stage, it does look like Geelong are probably the front runners to get his signature. And moving on to a different player, Cal Archie. This is a very interesting one that we heard in more recent weeks. He's been offered a move to Adelaide and the West Coast Eagles. So in Adelaide, first of all, from the Kimbo and Root show, this is Kim Dillon and Michelangelo Rucci's show on SEN in SA. He did say that you can take it as fact Adelaide has put an offer to Callum Archie with a healthy proposal to bring him out of Brisbane, as the Lions are paying him unders. And according to the Western Australian, West Coast Eagles have been linked to the Premiership star, an important forward yet to re-sign with the Lions beyond this year, and the Eagles are reportedly showing interest in him. Now the Crows, obviously a little bit more on the successful end, while West Coast probably could offer a little bit more money. However, we've seen the Crows are probably not paying that much money for a lot of their key players, but it will be interesting to see what they will do. Sam Draper has also been linked to the Crows in more recent times. It looked like it was almost certain that Draper was going to be moving to the Lions, but in recent weeks, it has seemed that the Crows have made one final pitch to Sam Draper to bring him to the club, according to Sam McClure on Footy Classified. I still think he's going to go to Brisbane. I think the Crows are probably a little bit behind, especially when they recently signed Riley Charlie O'Brien. He did seem a little bit surprised when asked in an interview about the prospect of a 2-ruckman team. So I still believe that Sam Draper probably going to the Lions at this moment in time. Now, sticking with Essendon, Dylan Shield is an interesting one here, obviously. Has been in and out of the Bombers team so far this year. According to Tom Morris, it does seem that if he is going to move elsewhere, it would be going back to the GWS Giants. He almost got back there last year, and as it stands, he's unlikely to be at the Bombers next year, and it does seem that the Giants would be willing to give him a 1-year deal. I actually like this move for the Giants. They've never really been a team that go for a top player. They usually go for someone who's a little bit on the outer of their team and then bring them in, make them play a role. And Dylan Shield obviously was at the Giants. That was his first club. Moved to Essendon in pretty famous circumstances. When Carlton tried to bring him to the club, he decided to move to Essendon. Does seem he's a little bit on the outer though with Brad Scott, so wouldn't be surprised if this move eventuates. Now, Liam Ryan has been linked to a few clubs, including St Kilda and Essendon. Carlton seems to have joined in the party in more recent times, and also Port Adelaide have become a potential suitor for the dangerous small forward. They have been able to poach a West Coast small forward in recent times in Willie Rioli, so it could be a move there for Liam Ryan. I'd be a little bit surprised if he did leave the West Coast Eagles, but these rumours have been circulating for at least the last month or so would keep your eye on that for West Coast fans. It does look like they're going for a bit of a revamp under Andrew McWalter. I think this year was kind of a feeler out for him to see which players he thinks are going to be the ones to work with going forward and others that may potentially move on. So Liam Ryan, even though he's played a lot of games this year, could be on the outer as he's a little bit more older and want to try and bring some youth through there. Now, another small forward that could be on the move is Malcolm Roses. Has been a little bit of a fringe player of the Suns this year, has came back into the team in the last few weeks. However, it does seem that the Blues, the Tigers, and the Sydney Swans are looking at him. A couple of years ago, I think it was his last year under Stuart Dew, he had a breakout season, but since then he's been a little bit down on form. It does seem that Carlton and Sydney are firmly in the mix, but Richmond do seem to hold the lead at this stage. Now, I think Malcolm Roses will likely leave the Gold Coast this season. I think that there's a couple of players that have been on the fringe that have came back into the team in recent times. You're thinking Alex Davies, Alex Sexton, a couple of others that I think the Gold Coast would rather sign than Malcolm Roses. So I wouldn't be surprised if he moves elsewhere. Now, sticking with the Blues, Mitch McGovern has been overlooked in Carlton's recent game, even though he had pretty decent numbers in the VFL last week, according to Mitch Cleary. It does seem that he'll probably fall short of actually triggering a new contract for 2026 with the Blues. Obviously, they still can re-sign him, but wouldn't be too surprised if they look to move him on. He is on pretty high money at the Blues, and I wouldn't be too surprised if maybe a top club who is looking for more experience in their defensive 50 would look at potentially bringing in Mitch McGovern. Even as a forward, we've seen him play there at times, but wouldn't be surprised if he moves on. I think Carlton are going to try and go for a little bit more of a revamp this year as well, going into next season, of course, missing finals after making the finals in 2024. I think it's kind of a time that they want to try and revamp their list, and they don't want to lose too many high players at their club. And with someone like Mitch McGovern, who's probably towards the end of his career and on high money, I think he'll probably leave. Now, Jack Silvani has been the talk of the town over the last month, really, especially the last couple of weeks. He was linked to Collingwood in the last video, or the last two videos we've talked about. The Bulldogs and Essendon have also came to the party in recent times. So at this stage, he could stay with the Blues, go to Collingwood in what would be probably one of the biggest moves in trade history, really, just on the fact of like family history. But then there was also the Bombers and the Western Bulldogs. I really don't know where this one lies. I think he'll probably leave Carlton at this moment in time, because I just think he was a little bit disheartened from the offers that they've given him in recent times. And he's had a breakout year this year in defence, which has really shown some potential for other clubs to bring him out. And with teams wanting to get better defenders, I think that he would be a great get for a lot of clubs. I really don't know which club he's going to go to, but I would be surprised if he stays at Carlton beyond this year. Now, going to Collingwood, there are a couple of players who are looking to potentially move on, who have been a little bit disgruntled regarding some offers that they have been given. First of all, Beau McQuarrie, according to John Ralph, is aware of clubs coming hard for him, even though he's contracted until 2027. Many Pies players are thrilled that the club is chasing high-profile talent like Jack Silvani, but some aren't as happy as they're not getting the offers that they probably deserve. We've seen some clubs, including the Gold Coast Suns, looking at Beau McQuarrie, along with a veteran Pie who is on career best numbers this year in Jamie Elliott. According to Sam Edmund, he said the Pies forward could potentially move at the end of the season. Despite a 2-year offer from Collingwood, Elliott is reportedly waiting up offers from northern clubs, including Brisbane and the Gold Coast, who have came out as a potential target for him in this upcoming trade period. And personally, I think this would be a good move for the Gold Coast to try and bring in some experienced talent. Of course, if Malcolm Roses was to leave, that's definite upgrade if they're able to get Jamie Elliott. Brisbane have been linked to him in years gone by and have been a little bit this year. I would be a little bit surprised if he did leave Collingwood though. I think that he will stay. He's probably looking for a little bit more on his contract, probably waiting till the end of the year to see how this team goes ahead and how he can continue his form. Has been a little bit down on form in the last month or so, but I wouldn't be too surprised in the next couple of weeks if he ramps things up again. I think he stays at the Pies. Bo McQuarrie, I don't know about that one. I think it could be 50-50. Collingwood would obviously get something back for him as a trade. Jamie Elliott, they'd probably have to let go for free, and I don't know if they'd get much back for him, just on the fact that he's a little bit older. So I don't know how much the compensation would be for Jamie, but I think Elliott, he'll stay at the Pies. Bo McQuarrie maybe a little bit on 50-50 at this moment in time. Another Collingwood player that has been linked to other clubs, especially in the last month or so, is Brody Myercheck. It does seem there's a little bit more optimism around the Pies in more recent times, though, that they can reach a deal with him. But we've seen the Swans, Blues, and Melbourne in recent times looking at him. But the one-year offer that Collingwood are potentially tabling to Myercheck doesn't seem to be enough that what he wants. So it is good signs for Collingwood that they have been able to at least shorten the gap between him signing and leaving. At this moment, I think that if a club comes hard for him on a 2 or 3 year deal, like a Melbourne who desperately needs someone to kick them goals up forward, I think he will leave. But if Collingwood can up their offer a little bit, even if it's still unders compared to other clubs that are trying to get him out of the club, I think that he'll stay at the Pies. He's been a long time servant of them, and I think he deserves a little bit more than what the Pies have given him in recent times. I think he famously was on the rookie list for the Pies for so many years and still fighting for a full list spot. Then he finally got it, and now it seems like they're still giving him unders. So I think he wants a little bit more from the Pies. I think a lot of these players that have been a little bit disgruntled over this past year will probably re-sign. Maybe one will slide away. We'll have to wait. Now, sticking with Collingwood targets, Marcus Windhager has been one that has come out in recent times. It does seem, according to Riley Beveridge, that 3 clubs are linked to the St Kilda midfielder. Melbourne, Essendon, and North Melbourne are the ones looking at him. However, it does seem that also Collingwood and the Giants have looked at him, according to other reports. On SEN, the run home at SA, it does seem that Collingwood could be in the mix. And Fox Footy have said that the Giants would be looking at him as well. Now, he was one of the players that Ross Lyon was indicating that wouldn't be leaving, that he's happy at the club. So, interesting watch for mine. But we've heard little whispers regarding him. So, Windhager, will have to wait and see. But especially the last month or so, he's really improved his craft as a midfielder and has become a lot more than just a tagger. So, definitely a wait and see. I think he'll wait probably till the end of the year before deciding what he wants to do, just to see if he can get a few extra dollars on that contract, which I don't mind whatsoever. But I think he'll probably stay at the Saints, in my opinion. Now, one that was like a shock out of nowhere was Cal Wilkie in the last week or so. Now, this first came to light earlier in the week, where Sam Edmund on 7AFL, or I think it was the Agenda Setters, he said that he's particularly concerned about the list management workings of the football club. Cal Wilkie is disillusioned with the direction of St Kilda, according to Sam Edmund. But this is one that Ross Lyon was quickly calling up and asking Cal regarding if he wants to leave. And when he rang him up, he says that he's never entertained leaving St Kilda. He loves the club, which is good to see. Now, I'm sure there were South Australian clubs that were immediately on the phone, ready to try and get Cal Wilkie out of St Kilda. Would be a massive get for both the Crows and the Power, especially Port Adelaide, on the fact that they just don't have a key defender. So to bring in Cal Wilkie in, I think would get them to be potentially not a bottom 4 side next year, as I think that they probably will be with their current list. But it does seem that St Kilda have got Cal Wilkie very well sewn up. I think he won't leave. There's no way in hell. But that was a very interesting story throughout the week that I did want to bring up. Now, one player at St Kilda that has been talked about throughout the whole year on trade rumours is Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera. And we've been entertaining the idea of him going to Port Adelaide for a lot of the time. The Crows a little bit. Some people are saying that the Crows are in front of Port Adelaide. Some are saying that Port Adelaide are in front. I totally don't know. So I don't think there's any sort of reason as to speculate on that sort of front. Now, Eddie Maguire has said Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera is a lot closer to being a St Kilda player in the last week or so. He says that the St Kilda fans should be a lot more confident regarding him staying. I've always felt like, and I said this in the last video, that he will stay at the Saints on a short-term deal. However, over the weekend, it does seem, according to Will Faulkner, that at this time of writing, Wanganeen-Milera is leaning towards joining the Adelaide Crows next season. He has to stress the fact that he hasn't made a definitive decision as of yet, but we have seen the two-horse race between St Kilda and Port Adelaide is no longer the case, that the Crows are well and truly in the hunt. Now, I am really bemused as to where he's going to go. I really struggle to speculate on which club he's going to be going to this season. I think right now, he still will stay at the Saints, but these reports just continue to come out. One day he's going to be going to Port Adelaide, the next he's staying at St Kilda, the other he's going to the Crows. Who knows if another club's going to join in the race very shortly. But right now, it seems like the Crows may potentially be in front of this three-horse race. Now, sticking with the power though, there have been a couple of players that have been linked to them. Jacob Ware from the Giants is the one who is a little bit on the outer of the Giants. He's been in and out of the team so far this year as a wingman. Riley Beveridge has said that the Power are leading the way to try and bring him out of the club. And because of the fact that he has been delisted multiple times from GWS and been put on the rookie list, he can actually go as a free agent, an unrestricted free agent. So the Power could basically get him for free, which would be great. And Will Brodie, a waffle star for a long time at the Dockers, has found it really hard to break into that first team for a couple of years now. It does seem that the Power are also linked to the out-of-favour Fremantle midfielder, with Josh Carr about to take over. Has had some links with Fremantle in the past, so I wouldn't be too surprised if the Power try to bring in a couple of those players, try and revamp their midfield, as if they are to get Wanganeen-Milera, which would be a massive get. They can also improve their list in other ways. We've seen that Jace Burgoyne's played a little bit wing midfield this year. That would, I think, be a lot better for him to go to half-back, and if they will get Jacob Ware, and then you've got other players that could potentially retire. Even Travis Boak, who's going to be retiring at the end of the year, definitely could be a much-needed upgrade in the midfield with Will Brodie. Now, next up, Buku Khamis. It does seem the Western Bulldogs tool is open for a fresh start, a second club, and more opportunity. He was linked to Collingwood a couple of years ago, I believe, before re-signing with the Dogs, but it does seem now he's on the outer with Luke Beveridge, and I think that he will move on. Can't get a first-team spot on the regular. Been a bit surprising too, because I've seen him as a good player when he's played in defence at times, and in the VFL throughout the year has kicked goals when moving forward, but seems like he's a little bit on the outer at this stage. Hasn't played a senior game since round 16, so I think he'll probably look to leave. Wouldn't be surprised if a couple of clubs definitely try to knock down the door and try and bring him in. He's a pretty versatile player as well, which I think a lot of clubs will enjoy. Now, Connor Butterick as well is set to decide on his future. Is weighing up an offer from the Gold Coast on a 2-year deal, and the Suns do want him to sign sooner rather than later, but he has seen some recent interest from the Western Bulldogs. We've also heard some news regarding North Melbourne looking at him. Interesting one, been in the team for most of the year for the Gold Coast, had a very good pre-season, has been in the team even though they've had players like Dan Rioli and John Noble join the club from the last year's trade period, so good on him, but I wouldn't be too surprised if he is one to look elsewhere and have a more secure spot in a lineup like the Dogs and the North Melbourne Footy Club. Now, Brendan Starskovic has been linked to the West Coast Eagles and Essendon in more recent times. Now it does seem that North Melbourne have came to the party, as the Kangaroos are understandably in search of defensive reinforcement amid another struggling campaign, especially down in defence. Now, that obviously does join the Bombers and West Coast, who have been strong looking for him. Brendan Starskovic is from Western Australia, which does, lean a lot of people to believe that he would move home. I still think he's going to stay at Brisbane. I think he will sign. I think he's probably just trying to get a couple of extra dollars on the contracts, as like a lot of players like to do at this time of year. I don't think he'll move to North Melbourne, but I do understand why the Roos would be definitely looking at him. Now, sticking on the Kangas, they do have some contract decisions to make at the end of the season, as at this moment they have to clear up 7 list spots ahead of the national draft. You've got players on their list who are all out of contract at the end of the year: Will Phillips, Cooper Harvey, Bryn Teakle, Callum Coleman-Jones, Darcy Tucker, Eddie Ford, Finbar Maley, Callan Dawson, and Miller Bergman. Now, Will Phillips has been linked to the West Coast Eagles, so I wouldn't be surprised if he leaves. Cooper Harvey has been in the regular 22 for the last few weeks, so I think he'll stay at the Kangas. Bryn Teakle has been a pretty good servant when Cherry was suspended this year, so I think he'd probably stay. Callum Coleman-Jones, I think, could be on the outer, in my opinion, as he's very injury prone. I think he probably have to look elsewhere, maybe delisted. Darcy Tucker's been out of the team for a lot of the season. I think he's probably gone. Eddie Ford's an interesting one, as he had a pretty good season last year. Hasn't been able to be a regular team member this year, so interesting to see how that one works out. Along with Callum Callum Dawson and Miller Bergman, in my opinion. They all could be delisted. And Finbar Maley, I think he's one to work with. I think he'll stay. I think they'll sign him on a short-term contract. Now, sticking with Essendon and their contract decisions, the club has offered out-of-contract backup rucks Nick Bryan and Vigo Vicentini a contract, as Sam Draper is looking to leave, you would imagine. Meanwhile, the likes of Will Setterfield, Jaden Laverde, Jackson Pryor, Ben Hobbs, Dylan Shield, Todd Goldstein, Davey Jr., and Lumen Luau are in contract limbo as well. Will Setterfield, I think, will stay. He had a pretty good season before the injury. Jaden Laverde is a bit of an interesting one. I'll have to wait and see. He's always been a pretty serviceable defender, but wasn't even in the team before all these injuries happened, so that'll be a watch. Jackson Pryor's been pretty good this season since joining as a delisted free agent from Brisbane, so I think he'll probably stay. Ben Hobbs, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts to look elsewhere, if I'm being honest. Dylan Shield, we talked about earlier in the video regarding him linked to the Giants. Todd Goldstein, I think he'll probably sign a one-year deal if he wants to keep going, because I think he's a very good reserve ruckman. Obviously didn't expect to have to play this whole year, but I think they will look to give him a one-year deal. Owen Davey, I think he's probably on the outer. And Lau, for mine, has had a really good season since coming into the regular team, so I think he'll probably get a contract. Now, finally, the team that I want to take a look at here is the Sydney Swans, because in recent times, the head coach in Dean Cox has pretty much came out and put everything out on the table to tell clubs around the competition what they're looking for in the off-season. He said in an interview about the upcoming trade period that we're going to go into this trade period on the hunt to get anyone who will suit the way we want to play. He thinks that they'll include a key forward, a dynamic mid, a key back, and a dangerous small forward. It includes a lot of things like that. Now, the Swans have been linked to a couple of key forwards this year. We've heard Jamara Ugle-Hagan, Harry Mackay, Charlie Curnow, even Brody Myercheck. Wouldn't be surprised if they get one of those guys at the end of the season. The dynamic mid's an interesting one. Haven't really heard a lot of news around Swans players being linked to dynamic mids, so I'll have to wait and see on that front. A dangerous small forward, that's probably the Malcolm Roses type that we've heard about in recent times. And then the key back's an interesting one as well, because they did pull out of looking at Jack Silvani in recent weeks. So wouldn't be surprised if they potentially look at a Buku Kamas, who has been looking to maybe go elsewhere at the end of the season. But key defenders, key forwards, looks like the Swans are really trying to revamp after a disappointing season after a very poor grand final. So really happy to hear about that as a Swans fan. But guys, that's pretty much all the trade rumors we have for this video. Make sure to let me know down below which one you believe is the biggest load of crap, as I love to read those sort of comments. And also make sure to like and subscribe. Like I said, in a couple of weeks time, we're going to be going over every single team's trade target player. I think it's going to be super exciting, so make sure to check that out. And guys, if you do enjoy the content and you want to check out more on this channel, then make sure to check out this video here right now.